Questions or observations? I'm looking for a really good question from someone. If you did have a really good question, what would it be? Can you get what? She's got the perfect question. This young lady, what's your name? Katie. She said, are you able to get Chris out of his trance? Because this man is in a permatrance. It's a work trance, so I just leave him in it because he's doing a fine job. That was such a good one. I'm going to give you the hypnosis cards. That's good. It's because of you, buddy. She was mocking you, but she got cards. Okay?
That's a great question, and I have a follow-up. I already have cards. Here's a follow-up. We did hear a speaker say that he never takes anybody out of trance, and that it's completely unnecessary. People are always in a trance, one way or the other. And does that actually matter?
It really makes very little difference to me. Whether or not, like you said, you heard a speaker say he never takes anyone out of trance. The key is, what trance are you in, at any given time? Is it appropriate? When I used to work with fibromyalgia, that's a great question, Ken. But when I used to work with fibromyalgia, I had worked with a lot of chronic pain people and a lot of kids with ADHD and ADD from Toronto Sick Kids Hospital. I had a pediatrician there who'd refer them to me. And how many of you hypnotize kids? They're so easy. They're the easiest. You never have to use a deepener with a kid. Never, never, never. They go right into it right away. A kid who had really bad warts. He was really into Dungeons and Dragons, and I told him a story about this horrible evil tower they tried to destroy, and it kept coming back because the wart would keep coming back on his hand. And finally, the knights went and attacked it and pulled it down with their horses and ripped it out of the ground, and then it disappeared and never came back. And I flushed it out more than this. Like a week later, the wart falls off his hand. Now, there's not even a hypnotic induction there. So at which point are we in trance? At which point are we going into trance or coming out of trance? It all depends on how we define it again, doesn't it? Is it really this thing? The model I've liked recently is this one. Let's turn this beach ball into the entirety of your awareness. And on top of it is a dime. And the dime is on top of a beach ball. Put the curves here so you remember it's a sphere, not a disc. So American dime on top of this beach ball. Between the dime and the beach ball itself is a green fuzzy coaster you can put your coffee cup on so it doesn't damage the coffee table. Now, you can't see that from the back. You're not supposed to be able to because it's a frickin' dime on top of a coaster, on top of a beach ball. Now, if you think of it in these terms, the dime is your conscious awareness, and the beach ball itself is all the unconscious, everything below the surface. All the stuff in the magic number 7 plus or minus 2 is up here on the dime, and the 3 to 20 million bits of information per second that are activated by the reticular activating system are down here. And that's what forensic hypnosis gets to as well. The bizarre thing is, everything that's down here has an immense power of imagery and imagination to create resources and all sorts of things, but also to create problems if things aren't done properly. Now, we'll get to that in a second. This coaster is the critical faculty. Not the critical factor, it is a faculty. So this coaster is the firewall of the mind that determines what information either gets into the unconscious or is prevented from getting into the unconscious, and it acts like a guardian at the gate. You are not born with a critical faculty. It is not part of the physical structure of your brain, it's part of your mind, whatever that is. They are created in early childhood, 4 or 5 years old, around there, a little bit later, by modeling authority figures, parents and teachers and so on. That's how you get one. But until you got a critical faculty, you believe anything. Look at little boys and little girls, they believe anything. Hey, Tommy, there's a purple dragon out in the hall. He's got a big box of candy for you. Tommy's going to run out and check, right? In 10 minutes, he comes back looking confused. He says, hey, Mike, there's no purple dragon in the hall with candy. And I say, ha, 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 ha. Of course not, son. You don't have a critical faculty. You don't realize it's ridiculous. One day you'll be an adult like me. The world will be a dark and terrifying place. So just enjoy it while you can. And leave him, quietly confused in the corner. Of course not. But the bottom line is, if I say to Stephen Blake, hey, Stephen, there's a purple dragon out in the hall, he's got candy. You're not going to check. I think none of you will check because you've got a critical faculty that says, A, dragons do not exist, and B, even if they do, the chance of them being purple is somewhat remote. And then going to step 3, the chance of said purple reptile being a purveyor of confectionery to small children is almost non-existent. So we don't go check. We got a critical faculty. Problem is, when we are under stress, the critical faculty essentially goes offline. And that's when we're very vulnerable. And historically, at least since George Estabrooks in 1945 wrote his book Hypnotism, historically, governments around the world have used this power that we call hypnosis for nefarious purposes. And at the end of the war, and even during the war, George Estabrooks from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, was a psychologist. He became head of psychology at Colgate University. And Estabrooks began working with M.T. Ornay from the University of Pennsylvania, who in 1959 did his first work on trance logic, how you can be both, in trance and, on a cruise ship that doesn't exist, and you're in, all these different things at the same time. And they began working together. And they worked with Dr. Ewan Cameron at McGill University in Montreal under CIA sponsorship, and began attempting to create Manchurian candidates who would kill on command, and also couriers who would carry information and could be tortured without revealing this if they went into East Germany and into Russia and were caught. And they attempted to use hypnosis alone. And at McGill University in Montreal, it came to light that dozens of Canadians and Americans, ordinary citizens, were brought in for psychiatric treatments, given sometimes 80, 100 doses of LSD without their knowledge, were subjected to electroconvulsive therapy without their permission. Some people, their minds were completely wiped out and destroyed. Ewan Cameron was as evil as anyone in any concentration camp has ever been. And this was all done under government control because governments want to use this power. And historically, governments worldwide have realized if you can keep a population afraid, nervous, on edge, their critical faculties go offline to a degree, and they are receptive to control. And the way you control a population is you use Hegelian dialectic, you engineer a crisis. That doesn't have to exist. You find the plan you want to do. You want to do plan X. You know the population will resist plan X, so you engineer a crisis, get everybody afraid, and then offer plan X as a solution. And everyone just wants the crisis over, so you get to put into practice what you plan to do all along. And I'd never say this is happening all around us. Never say that again. But it is, it's just, everybody's doing it. And the scary thing is how vulnerable we are to this stuff. One of the greatest dangers is thinking that because we are hypnotists and know about it, that we're somehow invulnerable. Unless we keep our critical faculties finely tuned, stuff gets in. It's worth updating the software in your own critical faculty every now and then and letting your brain make you a little more careful. Remember, you've got to question everything. You question me telling you this, as Noam Chomsky said. We are so susceptible to this. I taught this to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Regina, their main depot. They're not Mounties who ride around on horses. They only do that for public displays. They're Canada's federal police, like the FBI in the US. And I was one of the very few civilians who was asked to lecture there. And I was talking about this sort of thing. And false memory syndrome, also known as paramnesia. And remember, back in the 70s and 80s, all of a sudden, everybody discovered when they went to a therapist, their parents were secretly Satanists, or they were taken on an alien spacecraft somewhere. It's always one or the other, or they were abused by someone who knew nothing about this, and therapists with all the right intention were creating in these reverie sort of fugue states, they were creating false memories. And people's families were breaking up over this stuff. Because if you put someone in a trance and start asking them about things, you'll create it. Your brain creates memories with kinase C, that protein, exactly the same, whether it's something real or whether it's something imaginary. It cannot tell the difference. I went out with a young woman before, the woman I wound up marrying, and this was largely one of the reasons. She was convinced, well, she was kind of interesting, but she was convinced that as a 4-year-old girl, she used to jump off the roof of their house with an umbrella and float around the neighborhood like Mary Poppins. And she was absolutely adamant that this had happened. And I went through the physics behind it, and she didn't listen to me. And I said, your parents would let you climb up on the roof? Well, I don't know how I got there. But she's convinced. And so at the RCMP depot in Regina, I wanted to demonstrate how vulnerable we are to suggestion. And we got a police officer, federal police officer, probably 27, 28 years old, really nice guy. I wanted someone who knew nothing about hypnosis, had never experienced it. And I got him to sit down. I said, well, just have a conversation for a minute. He said, sure. I said, you ever go to this is Canada. You ever go to a summer cottage? Everybody has a cottage or a cabin somewhere, or they go camping. He said, yeah. He said, we had a cabin in northern Manitoba. He said, I was raised in Winnipeg. I said, oh, that's interesting. What was it like? He said, oh, it was out in the woods. It was a small lake. He starts describing it in detail. I said, okay, why don't you just, eyes closed now. Said, just stretch your legs out. Get comfortable. Imagine you're sitting on a really comfortable lawn chair up at your cabin in the woods. And he goes, yeah, it was nice. I said, you ever find it really relaxing there? He said, yeah. I said, did it get dark there at night? He said, oh, man, did it ever. I said, I bet there were a lot of stars, weren't there? Now, listen to the tense. I'm talking past tense. Listen to when I switch to present tense. There's no induction. So, a lot of stars, right? Yeah, a lot of stars. Some of them really bright. Yeah, some of them were really bright. Did you notice that one was brighter than all the others? Maybe I did. Was it moving? Yeah, come to think of it, there was one moving. I forgot that. Did it land behind the trees? Yeah. Was it a star or is it something else? Present tense. He says, it's a UFO. He said, I forgot. A UFO landed. It landed behind the trees. I went and saw. This guy now has a completely formulated memory in about 6 or 7 minutes that he will pass a polygraph test for. He's convinced it's real. So we got to be really, really careful. The sort of stuff we put in people's heads, right? We go messing around there. You never know quite what we're going to find. So when the critical faculty goes offline in hypnosis, it becomes permeable. It lets information in, but it always becomes a hidden observer that is watching what is going on. Hilgard wrote all about the hidden observer in 1975, and it's why a lot of the stuff that you see on TV, like with Darren Brown and that, and getting people to shoot people and stuff, why it is so suspect. Remember, television, I've done a lot of television. It's never what it seems to be, first of all. But secondly, you can never engineer a test that you can hypnotize someone, give them a gun, and get them to go and shoot someone. Because the hidden observer idea is that there's always going to be a part watching to make sure that this is safe. And it will assume that it's going to be stopped. It knows it's on a TV show. And it assumes it's either a blank in the gun or whatever. There's no way of engineering it short of actually killing someone, which is not going to happen. But when this thing becomes permeable, lets information through, you're right into the unconscious mind. Then all bets are off. You can do almost anything. That's why you got to watch out for the word don't. Don't is a terrible word unless you know how to use it. Because if you say, how many of you have small kids or did have young kids at one time? Okay. What happens if you say to a very young child, don't spill that milk on the new couch? Yes, people. Somehow it increases the likelihood it gets spilled sometimes. And then you scream at the kid and say, I told you not to spill it. Well, no, you actually told him to spill it. Because what you're doing is putting in an embedded command. The unconscious mind is not real good with language, and the way it processes negatives is through deletion. So it's the old one, if I tell you don't think of a pink elephant, the only way you can make sense of the sentence, unless you're a linguist, is to create a pink elephant, and okay, that's what we don't want, and wipe it out, put a line through it, hit a delete key, something. But you've got to create it first, and then get rid of it. Does that make sense to you? Okay, so if you've got a little kid, the reason we delete it is because of the critical faculty. So if I say to you, Katie, don't spill that milk, you instantly, in 1/30th of a second, make an internal representation, usually a picture, of what it means to spill the milk. And you go, okay, that's what we don't want, you delete it. Little kid doesn't get round to deleting it. They make the internal picture of spilling it without a critical faculty. They do not proceed to the next step and will jostle it or something and wind up spilling it. Now, it's easy to get around. Very simple. Obviously, what you're going to do is speak in positives instead of negatives. So instead of saying, don't spill the milk, you say, be careful with that milk. Now there's no deletion step, and milk miraculously stops being spilled all around North America, wherever this lecture goes forward. Oh, and Britain as well. Now, that's fine if we were dealing just with little kids, but we're not. We're using hypnotic language all the time. And if you are dealing with a human being who is under stress, and I think most of us would agree that most of the world is under stress now. Everything has gotten faster except driving. You know, messages go around the world in a second, but we're still stuck in traffic. All of those things, it pushes our blood pressure up. When you are under stress, you begin to produce cortisol and norepinephrine, and when that happens, your critical faculty starts to go offline. It becomes permeable. The greater the stress you are under, the more your brain will respond like a small child, hence the governmental attempt to keep populations nervous and afraid. My wife's really cool. So we've been married 38 years, and her motto, we live in Toronto, which is the most cosmopolitan, multicultural country, or city on earth. 158 languages spoken there, something ridiculous. And everybody pretty well gets along. And my wife's motto is, I will not hate and I will not fear. Just refuses to hate anybody or fear anybody. And man, it's a great one, because anything that divides us and makes us nervous is not good for us. So if somebody's under extreme stress and you tell them, don't such and such, you're setting up an embedded command. So let's look at, if it's don't spill that milk, the message, spill that milk, goes in first as an internal representation. Without the critical faculty, the don't doesn't come in, and this goes into the unconscious. Example, you wake up in your hotel room at 2 a.m., you smell smoke, and your unconscious mind wakes you up. And you go out in the hall, and you look, and yeah, it's full of smoke. And just then somebody comes out of their room. It's a guy, he's got a bathrobe on. He goes, he's panicking. He says, wow, what are we going to do? This place is full of smoke. There's a fire. I just tried to get down the stairwell, but there's too much smoke there. And we can't use the elevator. It might take us right to the floor where the fire is. I saw that in the towering inferno. And he said, what should we do? And you take control. And you say, don't panic. Now, here's what's going to happen. First of all, they will make an internal representation in 1/30th of a second of what panic means to them, and it will not be good. And then they'll go from panicking to amplifying it and uber panicking in a fraction of a second. So you have to change it. So instead of don't panic, change it to remain calm. There is a linguistic presupposition there that they are already calm. And the weird thing is, if you tell somebody who's freaking out to remain calm, and you say it congruently and with rapport, they calm right down. Case in point, I taught this to Ontario Provincial Police. And up north of Toronto, a place called Aurelia, that's where their main depot is. Highway 400, we get a lot of snow there, a lot of whiteout conditions, really scary, some of the worst roads in the world in the winter. The snow blows across from the farm fields, whites out everything in an instant, and you're doing 60 miles an hour. And so I was teaching for OPP, and a female constable stood up. She said, I want to share with you how I use this. I said, share with the class. She said, I learned this from you a couple of years ago. Said she was traveling on Highway 400, got a call that there was a crash. Middle of winter, there was a car had gone off the road, single vehicle crash, hit black ice, went off and hit the rocks at the side of the road. 2 people in the car. The passenger was not wearing a seatbelt and was immediately killed. And the engine block had come through into the car. The driver, his right leg was broken, and he was leaking blood from the femoral artery really fast. She looks in the window, the windshield's smashed, everything's smashed, sees the guy's obviously dead. And the driver looks over, sees his friend's dead. She puts her thumb in his femoral artery, stops the bleeding, as you're supposed to. He sees his buddy's dead and goes into shock, has this massive PGO spike. His critical faculty essentially disappears. He says, looks at his leg broken, and he says, I'm going to lose my leg. They're going to amputate. I'm going to lose my leg. And she says, remain calm. And he went, okay. That was it. I mean, that was it. Just as simple as that. She didn't say, don't panic. Remain calm. Thank you. Thank you. The power I have is just frightening. Right. So, you gotta watch out for don't. you gotta watch out for don't. Realize if they're under stress, you're going to get the opposite effect of what you want. Tell them what to do, not what not to do. Funny thing, just a side note on this, I was blessed to be able to lecture at the North American Use of Force Conference. And that was in King City, Ontario, north of Toronto, at college up there. And they had cops there, male, female, undecided, young, old, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, frontline officers, desk jockeys, every kind of cop you can imagine, from Anchorage, Alaska to North Bay, Ontario, and even Puerto Rico and Mexico. And we had a room full of cops, and I was teaching words as a force option. We want to go to words first, then you've got wrist compressions and arm locks, and then you've got pepper spray, then you've got impact weapons and tasers, and then finally you're up to what you don't want to do, which is lethal force. And rookies are afraid they won't get escalate fast enough and they go to lethal force too quickly. You want to keep it at words if you can, because words are friendlier, boys and girls, friendlier than guns. And so I got this conference, and I said, what do you say when you pull out your sidearm, drop into a Weaver stance, point at somebody's center body mass, and rack this Glock ready to fire? Because regardless of what the media would have you think, police North America-wide cannot show up just firing like Wild Bill Hickok. They've got to use a police challenge. Is Stephen Watts in the room? Oh, he's not here. Oh, he's not here. Louisiana. He's a sheriff's deputy. I wanted to ask him what they use there. He's in a really interesting state, Louisiana, because as the governor said, half the state's underwater and the other half's under indictment. It's kind of cool. So they pull out a firearm. I said, what do you say before you pull the trigger? And they all said, police, don't move. And I said, what happens when you say that? And they said, he runs away. They just assume that's supposed to happen. Well, think about it. You're in a 7-Eleven. You're buying a quart of milk and a loaf of bread, and you're standing at the counter. And the police have heard that it's being robbed, but they're at the wrong 7-Eleven. They're supposed to be 2 blocks away. And they burst in, and they pull out, Sig Sauers or Remingtons or something, point them at you, and they think that you're about to kill someone or rob the guy, and they yell, police, don't move. You think you might get an adrenaline dump at that moment, even though you're innocent, when you see the guns? And studies have shown, you just hear, move! And everything in you tries to run as fast as humanly possible. And they've said you can cover up to 200 feet and not have any recollection of taking a single step. You're just suddenly in the parking lot. Well, that was cool. Except you're being pursued by bullets, which are faster than you are. Yes, Mark. Wrong. Go ahead. Yeah, that's perfect. Perfect example. Yeah. So watch. I told them to say instead, say police stand still. One guy said, what about police freeze? I said, no, because freeze is cultural. To some of the people new to Canada, freeze means cold. So you want to say police don't move? Wrong. Don't say police don't move. Yes?
Just a clarification. You said your wife's statement was, I will not hate, I will not fear.
Yeah.
It does not fall in that same category, like don't?
No, because it isn't an instruction. It's linguistically the absence of something. I know, it's just, you can tie yourself in knots with these things if you're not careful. Don't tie yourself in knots. Okay. We got 10 minutes left. Why don't we just wrap up with some questions and stuff? Let's do Q&A for 10 minutes. Oh, the clench. Okay, let's do that right now. We got time. We got 20 minutes. No, don't we have 20? 5:50. We got it. We're going to do it. Okay, Chris, we're going to demo it, and then you guys are going to do it. Here we are. See how adaptable we are? We got it wrong, and we're immediately fixing it, which is the right thing to do. So in a way, we were right all along. Come here, Chris. Come here, buddy. You're going to demo just so we can go through it fast.
Yeah, get someone who has never experienced it.
Okay, someone who's never experienced it. Come on up. Thank you. You were fast there, young lady. What's your name?
Jesse.
Jesse, thank you. Jesse, you want to experience a really cool induction that's going to enable you to get some new hypnotic power growing and more powerful all the time?
Yes.
I thought you would. Close your eyes. Go inside. Ask your unconscious if that's okay. All right. She knows what she's doing, doesn't she? All right. You can open your eyes. I want you to squeeze. I'm going to take my Lord of the Rings power ring off. I want you to squeeze these 2 fingers. You know any blood pressure issues, do you?
No.
Okay. Stare at that. Squeeze. Tightly. No, really tightly. Eyes closed now. Continue to squeeze tighter and tighter. Come on, my grandmother can squeeze tighter than that. She's dead. That's it. Really tight. That's it. Tighter and tighter. Put all your focus, all your attention there. A little bit more, Jesse. A few seconds more. That's right. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to relax your hand so I can remove my fingers. Don't open your eyes. Keep your eyes shut and relax your hand just enough to let me remove my fingers now. That's right. Oh, no. Keep your hand closed. Tight, 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 tight. No, tighter, tighter. Open your eyes. Look at it. Look at it. Look at it. Close your eyes. Tighter, tighter, and tighter. Now, just relax it just enough that I can remove my fingers. Just enough. That's it. And let your hand just relax now in that position. That's it. Focus your attention on it. And imagine the hand, just like with that kinesthetic ambiguity, is locking, but locking shut. Locking tightly the muscles, easily and effortlessly sealing themselves into that position. And as your hand locks, your unconscious mind searches and finds a resource that it can install for you, something to improve your hypnotic ability and drive it through the roof. Just awesome. And when your unconscious has found below the surface exactly what you need, you can give me a nod. That's right. And in a moment, I want you to open your eyes and look at your hand. Stare at it now. Stare at it intently. And the resource your unconscious has found will begin to install only as you open your hand. And you feel the resistance because it's a powerful resource and has to fit into that slot, and your hand is so locked, so powerfully locked, but your unconscious will help you. Sometimes we have to work for change, but this will get you there. And as you work to open that hand, I know, keep staring at it. What does it feel like?
Wow.
Your unconscious is very powerful. She doesn't want you opening it yet. Not ready to install? Here's the trick. When the person gets really stuck, the unconscious mind uses the other hand. Watch. And while you keep looking at it, I'd like your unconscious to take over control of this hand and use this hand to open your right hand. There we are. Installed. How's that? How are you feeling now?
Cool.
Excellent. Wide awake now. Excellent. Good work. Give her a hand as she goes back. So, have a seat, young lady. So, clench induction to debrief. This is really good for teenagers. They like the experience. It's great. It gives your clients an experience they will never forget. Use this on hyper-analytical clients, especially with the V structures in their writing. This will blow them away. And the key is use the first two fingers of your hand. When they grab it, not so far down that they're pinching the web here, 3/4 of your finger, squeeze tightly. And you say really tightly. Now make sure they don't have blood pressures problems. You don't have having a stroke while you're doing this. Have them breathe normally, but squeeze tighter and tighter. Now, eyes closed now, and continue to squeeze even tighter. And I always use the comedy line, my grandmother can squeeze tighter than this and she's dead. And it makes them laugh and they don't take it too seriously and it's fun. So they squeeze, and after they've done this for maybe 20, 30 seconds, their eyes are closed, and you say, I want you to relax your hand just enough that I can remove my fingers. So you do that. And their hand is cataleptic and hovering. Now you draw their attention to it with these little kinesthetic touches and say, let your unconscious mind lock this hand up tightly. And now you can have them find a resource. Once they've done that, the hand is locked, and the resource will install, and they will awaken as they stare at their hand and open it. It's got a built-in false awakening. It's got incredible focus of attention. Mine is actually, because I've done this lots of times talking about it, you can tell it opens freaking weird. And then if it's taking too long, get the unconscious involved in the other hand. By saying it's the unconscious, they're not consciously overriding it. The unconscious will take control. Real simple. Again, it's a back pocket tool. You can use it to get them in trance. You can use it to prove they're in a trance. It's a convincer. Use it to get them to stare at it. Don't say look at it, say stare. It's more powerful. And as they open it, the resource installs or they awaken, whatever you want. Everybody, you got 3 minutes. Go do it on someone. What?
It ends in
I know.
3 minutes. In 3 minutes, we're done.
I know.
We'll never get everyone back to class.
Oh, never mind. Disregard previous message. Chris Thompson has said nobody gets to do this. You do it out in the hall. Do it in the hall.
Here, hold on.
Okay.
Okay, we only have 3 minutes left in the entire class. That's why
You don't have a voice.
Yeah. There's only 3 minutes left to do it. So anyone who wants to stick around can practice. This isn't really
All right. Anyway, we are in our final 2 minutes.
So we're going to have 2 minutes of Q&A, and then we'll wrap up. And then you can stick around and practice if you want to.
Okay. Right. That chilled martini is sounding better all the time. Any final questions as we wrap up here, guys?
We have a great question over here.
They got a great question over here. Go ahead.
Why do you have them squeeze their fingers or something first and then release it?
Rather than their own hand.
Rather than just squeeze their hand again.
When they squeeze your fingers first, instead of just making a fist, Yeah. When you squeeze the fingers first, instead of just locking your hand shut, it's much more powerful. You're creating a naturally occurring phenomena by doing this. Little kids have done this trick for years. What I did was turn it into a hypnotic induction. So by doing it, squeezing the fingers, it works even better than just making a fist. Something about that position. But it's a wonderful thing. Remember to say at the end of it, your hand is normal again. Remove test suggestions. Always remove them. Yeah, you're getting the whole deal. We give you all the training on it. You'll get that included, including all the debriefing as we discuss it all. You'll be able to do it all broken down perfectly. Have fun with this one. It's a great one.